It started with a single plane crossing the desert night. No one knew then that this small operation would spawn an empire worth billions, an organization that would flood American cities with drugs for decades, and a network so resilient that even when its leaders fell, the machine kept running. The Sinaloa Cartel didn't just become powerful, it redefined what a criminal empire could be. The story begins in the rugged mountains of western Mexico, in a region known as the Golden Triangle, where the states of Sinaloa, Durango, and Chihuahua meet. This remote terrain had long been home to marijuana and poppy cultivation, but it was a man named Pedro Aviles Perez who transformed subsistence farming into organized crime. Known as El León de la Sierra, the Lion of the Mountain Range, Aviles was a pioneer who understood something others didn't. Drugs moved faster by air. In the late 1960s, he became one of the first traffickers to use aircraft for smuggling drugs across the U.S. border, laying the foundation for industrial-scale operations. Aviles wasn't just a smuggler, he was a teacher. Young men from Sinaloa's poverty-stricken villages watched and learned. Among them were Rafael Caro Quintero, Ernesto Don Neto Fonseca Carrillo, and a teenager named Ismael Zambada Garcia, who would later be known as El Mayo. These men grew up in a world where opportunities were scarce, and survival often meant breaking the law. For them, drug trafficking wasn't glamorous, it was a way out. By the early 1980s, the drug trade in Mexico had consolidated under the Guadalajara Cartel, led by Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, who controlled trafficking routes from Colombia to the United States. Two enforcers working for this organization were Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán and Ismael El Mayo Zambada. They handled the dirty work, protecting shipments, eliminating rivals, and ensuring operations ran smoothly. Both men proved themselves reliable, ruthless, and intelligent. Everything changed in 1985 when the Guadalajara Cartel orchestrated the kidnapping, torture, and murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena. The killing provoked an unprecedented response from U.S. and Mexican authorities. Félix Gallardo was arrested in 1989, and without his leadership, the Guadalajara Cartel fractured into regional organizations. From the wreckage emerged the Sinaloa Cartel, born in the chaos and led by men who had learned every lesson the hard way. The Sinaloa Cartel wasn't built like other criminal organizations. Instead of a rigid hierarchy, it operated as a federation, a network of semi-autonomous factions united under shared leadership. El Chapo, El Mayo, Juan José, El Azul, Esparragoza, and the Beltrán Leiva brothers formed an alliance in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Each leader controlled his own territory and operations but coordinated on major decisions, sharing resources and intelligence. This structure made the cartel nearly impossible to destroy. When one leader was arrested, the others continued operating. When one faction was weakened, another absorbed its territory. The Sinaloa Cartel established strongholds in the Golden Triangle and expanded aggressively into new markets, diversifying from marijuana and heroin into cocaine smuggled from Colombia. By the 1990s, the cartel had perfected its smuggling methods. They built sophisticated tunnels under the U.S.-Mexico border, complete with lighting, ventilation, and rail systems to transport tons of drugs. They bribed officials at every level: local police, military commanders, judges, and politicians, ensuring their operations faced minimal interference. El Mayo himself later admitted that paying bribes was standard practice from the very beginning. While El Mayo preferred to operate in the shadows, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán became the public face of the cartel. Short in stature but ruthless in ambition, El Chapo was a master strategist who expanded the cartel's reach across Mexico and deep into the United States. Under his leadership, the Sinaloa Cartel waged bloody wars against rival organizations, the Tijuana Cartel, the Gulf Cartel, and later the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. These conflicts were brutal. Entire towns became battlegrounds. Bodies appeared on streets with messages carved into flesh. The violence served a purpose: to control trafficking corridors known as plazas, which were essential for moving drugs north. The Sinaloa Cartel fought its way into Tijuana, traditionally controlled by the Arellano Felix family, using both violence and negotiation. By the 2000s, they had a solid foothold in one of the most valuable smuggling routes in Mexico. El Chapo's fame grew with each escape and recapture. In 2001, he escaped from a maximum security prison by hiding in a laundry cart. He was recaptured in 2014, only to escape again in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel that opened directly into the shower of his prison cell. The tunnel featured lighting, ventilation, and a motorcycle on rails, a testament to the cartel's resources and reach. His second escape humiliated the Mexican government and cemented his legend. But legends don't last forever. What truly separated the Sinaloa Cartel from its rivals wasn't violence, it was corruption. The cartel understood that bullets alone couldn't guarantee success. They needed protection from the inside. El Mayo and El Chapo built a vast network of bribed officials that allowed them to operate with near impunity. In 2024, the full extent of this corruption was exposed when Genaro Garcia Luna, Mexico's former Secretary of Public Security, the man tasked with leading the country's war on drugs, was sentenced to more than 38 years in a U.S. prison. Garcia Luna had accepted millions of dollars in bribes from the Sinaloa Cartel in exchange for protecting its shipments and shielding its members from arrest. He was the highest-ranking Mexican official ever convicted in the United States. This wasn't an isolated incident. El Mayo admitted during his guilty plea in 2025 that the cartel paid bribes to police and military commanders so they could operate freely, and that these payments had been made since the organization's earliest days. The cartel didn't just bribe low-level officers, they bought entire institutions. El Chapo's luck ran out in January 2016. Acting on intelligence, Mexican Marines raided a safe house in the coastal city of Los Mochis. A fierce gun battle erupted, leaving 5 cartel gunmen dead. El Chapo fled through an escape tunnel under the house, but he was captured shortly after trying to steal a car. This time, there would be no escape. In 2017, he was extradited to the United States. In 2019, he was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to life in prison, plus 30 years. The man who had once been the world's most wanted drug lord now sat in a supermax facility, locked in a cell 23 hours a day. But the Sinaloa Cartel didn't collapse. El Mayo took full control and continued leading the organization with the same quiet efficiency he had always employed. The cartel adapted, evolved, and survived, proof that it was never about one man. The empire finally began to crack from within. On July 25, 2024, Ismael El Mayo Zambada was arrested in the United States under circumstances that remain controversial. Many believe he was betrayed by members of Los Chapitos, the faction led by El Chapo's sons. The arrest triggered a violent schism within the cartel. On September 9, 2024, war broke out. El Mayo's faction, led by his son Ismael Mayito Flaco Zambada Siqueiros, launched coordinated attacks against Los Chapitos across Sinaloa. The state descended into chaos, streets emptied, schools closed, bodies appeared daily. The violence was unprecedented, a civil war within the most powerful cartel in the world. By 2025, the conflict showed no signs of ending. Los Chapitos reportedly formed an alliance with the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, their former rivals, in a desperate bid for survival. The empire that had endured decades of government pressure and rival cartels was now tearing itself apart. In August 2025, El Mayo pleaded guilty in a New York federal court to leading a continuing criminal enterprise. At 75 years old, the man who had evaded capture for decades finally admitted his role in running one of the most violent and powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world. He acknowledged overseeing operations that smuggled millions of kilograms of drugs into the United States, imprisoned millions of Americans in addiction, and corrupted entire branches of the Mexican government. The Sinaloa Cartel became the most powerful criminal empire in the world through innovation, corruption, and violence. It survived the arrests of its leaders, wars with rival organizations, and relentless pressure from Mexican and American authorities. But power built on such foundations is inherently unstable. El Chapo sits in a supermax prison for the rest of his life. El Mayo, once the most elusive drug lord in history, will die behind bars. The organization they built is now destroying itself from within. The billions of dollars, the armies of sicarios, the networks of corruption, none of it could prevent the inevitable. Criminal empires don't end with glory. They end in prison cells, shallow graves, and betrayal. The Sinaloa Cartel's rise to power is a story of ambition and strategy, but its collapse is a reminder that no amount of money or violence can sustain an empire built on suffering. In the end, every empire falls, and those at the top fall the hardest.